Yes guys, what is going on? Welcome back to another video, and in this video we're taking a trip down to Dub Customs to do some pre-checks on the M2 before it gets its MOT. It is a 3-year-old car as of Saturday, so obviously with any new car that you get, you've got 3 years before you need your first MOT, so we're going to head down there to get the MOT sorted. So in the last video with the M2 we did the forged charge pipes courtesy of Williams Performance, so TWHD10 gets you 5% off the entire store. Along with that, we also fitted this banger off a steering wheel courtesy of VPEX trim, so again, hit the man up. But yeah guys, we're gonna go for a drive obviously to get the MOT sorted, obviously Dsc Off, as you know. Casual. I'm joking, I'm panicked a bit. So guys, let me also draw some attention to this lovely t-shirt. So it's currently a sample, so again, I'm going to obviously play my cards close to my heart. However, there are going to be shirts coming to you guys soon. So obviously I've got to test them out, make sure they fit right and make sure everything's all post prosthetic and that. But obviously guys, you will be getting these shirts available to you, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But yeah guys, I obviously didn't own a BMW until I owned my M140. That was my first ever BMW. Prior to that, I've had Audi and Mercedes, I've had VWs, and the Audi and the Mercedes, both in particular, again, these weren't the top of the range like RS3 or Mercedes flagship C63. What the hell is that noise? Stone chips, lovely. Lovely. So yes, I was saying, they weren't the top of the range flagship models. However, those cars all had an individual driving setting. By that I mean you could configure whatever you want. You could configure the throttle pedal. In fact, it had the M settings. In short, it had the M settings. So as you know, on the M cars, you can do a lot of adaptations to how you want, like to drive the throttle, how you want the steering feel. And on the BMWs, none of them, nada, no pococo, I don't know what that means, but none of those cars, including this one being an M2, had the option to do individual until obviously the latest M2. Even though the E93 and the E46, I'm not sure about the older ones, they all have settings down there where you can change the power, which is the throttle position, where you can change the steering feel. And I know they're the full fat M cars, but if the other manufacturers and the other competitors done it to theirs, why didn't we do it on our standards, on our standard 140s, on the standard M2? I don't know, it's jarring. But yeah, I also drive, as you probably saw from the beginning, in Dsc Off 70% of the time. Bearing in mind I do own another car, and it's like, it's annoying that I have to do that to enjoy the car, because any other driving mode, I just feel it's not for me. Comfort's great, which is what we're putting along in now, and obviously with comfort, you get, let's see, not half throttle, but driving around in a freaking, I was gonna say industrial state, but it's not. Driving through a residential area, you can see it's changing at about 2k RPM. We're doing about 30, actually doing 30. Give way to your right. Luckily the Mercedes is blocking him, so you can keep going. Is it just me? Does anyone go down a roundabout and try and clip it like you're clipping an Apex sort of thing? The track base needs to come back ASAP. But yeah, as I was saying, road ahead closed. Lovely. As I was saying guys, the comfort for me is ideal. You're doing day to day, if you're not going for a hoon, it's amazing. It changes up when it needs to, and even if you do punch it into the sport mode or the sequential mode on the DCT, you'd know straight away it's not going to give you those harsh upshifts. So I think without having that drive logic button in this mode, it's probably in the lowest, in terms of harshness, it's in the lowest setting, and for me that's ideal. That's ideal, because obviously if I do change, I don't want to lose any traction, I don't want them strong aggressive occasions, especially if I'm just cruising to work or if I'm just cruising to, I've got a long journey, I just want to take my time. That then moves us into sports. So a flick of the button and you can hear straight away it's downshifted into third. We're still doing 30 and now we're in 4th gear, but if I give it a little bit more throttle, it's gone down into 3rd. So sport is great. Sport is great if you wanna, if not if you don't know how to drive, but if you just want to go for a hoon, sport is great. But again, it's not for me, because obviously with a rear wheel drive car, the whole reason of you getting a rear wheel drive car is you want that full driver experience, and you're not going to get that driving experience without getting the back end out a few times, but getting a bit of like squeaky bum time a few times, and that's only going to happen with the traction off or just slightly off. So sports is great, because I think Sport is the only option on the BMWs anyway, where you feel like you have half a choice in customizing the car. So when you flick it to Sport, you get a configure Sport option, and you can change the damping. So if you own like a 140 with adaptive dampers, you can change the damping. But with the M2 not having any adaptive dampers, all I get is the choice to change from a heavy or a light steering, which in this mode it's a heavy steering wheel, heavy steering feel rather, and with the pedal you get an aggressive Sport. So it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. So if I've done a log on BM3 on the 140, so I'm sure what I'm saying. If I put my foot halfway through the pedal, you're gonna get about 80%. So 50% pedal, like physical pedal push, gives you 80% off boost. So it's gonna imagine that you're pressing it 80%, which isn't great, because I think for me, especially the way I drive, I'm going around the bend and I'm applying that throttle, I don't want 80% if I'm pushing 50. I don't want 50% if I'm pushing 25, you can see what I'm trying to say. So for me, the sports mode is just not ideal. And if you do change it down to Sport and configure the throttle to be comfort, what happens then is that it just gets too soft. So it just doesn't make sense, because you've got heavy steering but soft throttle, so it doesn't add up at all. Which then leads me on to Sports Plus. So we put it in Sports Plus, you get this sign that says off, which is very, very confusing to most people, because I think a lot of people assume that it off means it's off. It's not off at all, it's still there, it's not going anywhere. Don't go anywhere! So just for an example, from that junction there, I was in Sports Plus and I literally put about 30% just to get me out, and it shoved me. And I cannot say this enough, I absolutely hate Sports Plus. The way it shoves you around the bend, and it gives you a full sense of speed. So third gear pull now, we're doing about 20. I can't stand it. What I love is the steering feel. So Sport steering feel for me is where it's at. If you do want to run comfort, you notice that with comfort the steering wheel feels a bit floppy, but when you look at Sports, it's nice and stiff, and it makes you feel like you're really connected with the car. So in that sense, Sports Plus or Sports steering feel is ideal, which is what you get in the Sports setting. So in this Sports setting, what the traction actually does, it goes to one of its options, which is MDM. So you either have Dsc on or MDM, which is Dsc off. So you have the little light that pops up, and it's either say Sports Plus or traction, which we'll get onto in a little bit. But like I said, it's nice for a hoon, but that's about it. Yeah, that's about it. We're coming into a few more cars here, so we're going to lay off the boost. But yeah, throttle position in Sports Plus is heavier and harder than anything else. So if you're not sure, the Sports setting will give you a Sport throttle response. Sports Plus goes above that. So Sports Plus will give you 100% boost at 50% throttle, and obviously Sport will give you 100% boost at 80% throttle. So Sport is a much better setting than Sports Plus. Again, that throttle, it doesn't make sense. And what really doesn't make sense is the fact that you're driving with traction off halfway, and actually call it halfway in Sports Plus, yet still the car thinks it's alright. You know what, it's got half the traction off, now let's give it even more boost. Then it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And even if you were on track, you probably wouldn't want to drive it in Sports Plus, because all Sports Plus does with the DTSD and the DSC in that halfway house is, as soon as it notices that you're stepping up and you ain't got the right correction on the steering wheel, it's going to be like, this guy doesn't know how to drive, let's get the rear brakes pumping, let's pump every single brake. So it's going to access every single brake on the car, and it's going to be squeezing the brakes. So every time you see that light flash up on the dash, that's actually your car braking for you. So what it does, it eats into the rear disc. So I remember when I first got the 140, I was new to the whole system, so I said, yep, Sports Plus is amazing. And then I noticed that my rear brakes wore out quicker than my fronts, which is unreal, which never ever happens. So straight away I looked into it, and then I realized, you know what, this little traction light off business isn't the real business. It's not the real lovely sort of thing. So I said straight away, let me find another mode. So I went through all of them until I find my settled mode, which we'll touch on in a second. So yeah, with Sports Plus as well, once you do whack it, whether you have the ZF or whether you have the DCT, when you do whack it into sequential on the DCT, you have the harshest upshifts. So the upshifts go into like level 3, which is the most aggressive one. So when you do change through a gear, you get up, if you haven't got great tyres, and you're going to get a little shuffle on the back. So when I did take this on on Brad at Brands Hatch, I just wanted to test the car out. So I purposely drove it in Sports Plus, even though I never drive it in Sports Plus. And every time I changed the gear, I had a shuffle from the rear. So for example, I don't know if you guys felt that, the rear end just goes. It always wants to go because the upshift's just too sharp. And obviously when you're on full throttle, you're at 100%, you're requesting 100%, and then you're asking it to change aggressively. Come on now. Which then leads me into traction. So one tap of the button and we go into traction. And what you'll notice straight away if going from Sports Plus to traction is that the throttle just slavers off. It just slavers off. It just literally falls off, which is okay, but it's a comfort throttle. So if that's what you're after, then it works. Obviously with traction, you're still in MDM, but it just doesn't make sense to me why you'd want to run in traction mode with a comfort throttle. You'd rather have a sportier throttle, not Sports Plus throttle, but a sportier throttle. But again, I'd have this over Sports any day. The only issue I have with running in traction is that you lose the steering feel. So the steering goes into comfort. Obviously the DSC stays in traction, which is the halfway off the MDM mode, and everything else is in comfort. And in terms of the gearbox, you're in level 2. So flat-footed here, change the gear, nothing stepping out, nothing stepping out. Again, change the gear, nothing steps out, nothing steps out. So that level 2 is absolutely perfect for me. I think 3, I just don't need it. I don't need that level of aggressiveness. Even if I did have to drive logic on the M2 comp, I wouldn't need it. So for me, so far, I'm more leaning to traction than any other mode on the car. Again, it's MDM, which isn't great for me, but it's about also, if you can manage to drive without the traction light coming on and still claim that you're hooning it, then fair play to you. That means you're a great driver, you've got great throttle response, and for me, hat off to you. Hat off to you. So DSC off, steering, perfect. Sporty steering, nice and precise. I can see these lovely cyclists, lovely. But they're wearing nice bright tops, which is great. And let's see how far over they're gonna go. When you're, okay, word of advice, if there's a puddle, wait, because they're gonna avoid, so I'm gonna avoid. So yeah, heavy steering, traction control, fully off, as you saw the little burnout there, little doggy, and everything else is in sport. It's perfect. For me, it's the perfect setting for how I want to drive, especially on a day like this. I would advise not driving in this mode if you're not the most advanced driver, if you don't really like, woo, nice one, Jackie, nice one, you nearly ripped me off, mate. Ooh, see, you got to be on it, because any little slip and it's gone. Ooh. Any little slip, just got to always look at these potholes on these roads, because they're shocking. But yeah, this mode for me is the one. It's the one, and honestly, this mode for me is the absolute one. And obviously with that, in sequential mode, drive logic, level 2. So it's not got the harshest, so it does give you a bit of wheel spin, but that is actually an attribute, or it's actually a feature of the M2. So the M2 actually does it. So people are like, how do you do? I don't do it. I am doing it, obviously, but it's not as hard as you can imagine. It's literally a feature of the, I think they call it wheel spin mode or something. Believe it or not, it's actually a feature embedded into the ECU. Ideally, I'd not drive around in it day to day. Ideally, I'd have everything to match this apart from the DSC. I'd have it in the halfway, I'd have it in traction, because with that you can still get the rear end out. And we're going to obviously be working with another company shortly just to test a product that's come to my attention, and obviously it means we can play around with a few of these settings. But yeah, stay tuned for that. But for me, if I'm looking at these settings here, bang on. If I want it to step out on these roads, then yeah, sure. But day to day, do I really want to drive it in DSC off? No. But my option is look after your rear brakes, have fun when you want, and not have a stupid throttle response that's going to send you into the tree or send you into these hedges. Like literally that hedge there, I can see it. I can see everything. I can see it. I've been obviously sniffing a bit of eucalyptus, but I can see straight away that that hedge is for me if I'm not taking my time, or if I'm in driving in Sports Plus. So for me, it's a no-brainer. DSC off for the win. And everyone will say, why you have DSC off, but you're a madman. No, I'm not a madman. I'm looking after my brakes, especially because the brakes on this for roados anyway cost about 180 per pop. So you're not going to want to, yeah, mate, what are you doing? You're stopping it, yeah, just stopping it. So that's my biggest rant about the BMW. So again, I know they're forcing you to go for the full fat M car, but like I said, it's all about staying in competition. Like for me, I'm not a fan of competition. I don't really believe, apart from the M2 competition and the M3 competition and the M4 competition, all the competitions in the M range, but I'm not a fan of it. I don't believe in it. I believe everyone's racing their own. Hello, mate. Whoa! Man went to grab his phone, you know. Yeah. He went to grab his phone, like, to take a picture of the M2, obviously. Now, I don't know what he did. He just ripped me off. But guys, for me, I'd say it straight. they should have known better. So BMW have rectified this in the M440, so make sure you check that video out if you haven't already. But in the M440, it's not the full fat M car. They've actually got an individual setting, and I'm so glad they've done this. For me, they should have done it from day one. They should have done it from day one, and for me, it's just, if you're really going to call it an M car and call it a good driving experience, then you've got to have a driving experience button that actually allows you to experience it the way you want to experience it. That's beautiful. That's good. That needs to go on a shirt somewhere. Alright guys, so the car has passed its MOT, which is great. Obviously with having a sports car, I ain't gonna slip with my little cheeky, tell her that's alright. You know what I'm talking about. So as you can probably see guys, the sun is coming out, which means it's gonna be a great Sunday afternoon drive. Shirts, big shout out to man like Ashton Hobart. I will be revealing who's going to be supplying these shirts in due time, but yeah, the quality is amazing, and again, it's a lovely shirt. So all the sayings that you hear me saying, again, give me some ideas if you want them on shirts, but for me, I'm just really excited to have my own merchandise, and obviously the support of you guys and the support of everyone around me, the team. I've got to say a big shout out to man like Rick, Define Coding. You know who you are, you know who you are, boys, you know who you are, boys. But yes guys, as always, if you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. God bless.